Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alyssa Cotten. We are here, day 14. We are going to talk about fear and how fear can be so debilitating, because fear can be divided into two parts. We have perceived fear and actual fear. So we're going to talk all about those two types of fear today. So let's get started. So fear is real, and fear keeps us safe from essentially dying, right? If we didn't have a sense of fear or an uneasiness when we do different activities, we would probably do a lot of really risky things and we would die, and as a civilization, we would not survive. So fear is there to keep us safe. So what happens is there's actually a lot of brain chemistry that goes on. And so the middle part of our brain is our limbic system. And there's an actual part of our brain called the amygdala, which is like the brain's smoke alarm. And anytime there's a sense of fear, that smoke alarm goes off and it signals to the brain, we need to go into one of our trauma responses. And so I have a video up here about the 5 different types of trauma responses. And essentially when the amygdala is signaled out, one of those 5 trauma responses kick in. And so fear, right? There's lots of things that can influence fear, right? So abuse, neglect, fear of dying, like if the situation could cause me to die or be harmed, witnessing violence, witnessing death, neglect. So there's a lot of areas where fear is real, right? The fear that I could be harmed, I could die is a real thing. What happens is that smoke detector in our brain, our amygdala, goes off when there are perceived fears, and then our body feels like we're going to die even though we might not actually die. For example, we might be going to a job interview and our brain is signaling danger, danger, we're not safe, this is not okay, we're going to die, but you will not actually die in a job interview, right? Obviously, there's probably an exception. I'm sure someone's out there watching saying, well, I know someone who went to a job interview and blah, 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 and they ended up dying, right? There's always going to be exceptions to the rules, but as a whole, going to a job interview is very safe, but it feels very uncertain. It feels very anxious. And that brain, the limbic system, the amygdala, is signaling danger, danger, which means harm. And so we have to take our attention back. We have to tell that smoke detector, hey, you have been triggered. We're not actually in danger. It's just a perceived danger. You can calm down. You can tell everyone up here, it's going to be okay. We're going to be safe, and kind of calm our senses. What happens is we live in a world where a lot of our basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, we can get pretty quickly. So if we need food, we can have delivery, we can have groceries delivered, we can go, there's 24-hour grocery stores. Shelter, there's so many types of shelters out there. Clothing, there's so many ways to get clothing, right? So our brain doesn't have to think the way it used to, right? So if you think about the way that the brain has changed from caveman days to present day, there hasn't been enough generations to change the brain. And how you change the brain is actually through epigenetics. And so you can research epigenetics, which talks about how we change and rewire our DNA to kind of change that. So when you think about like the modern age, even since the 80s, the last 40 years, just how technology has changed, we haven't had enough generations to kind of click through the brain to realize things that are scary and are fearful are not actually going to cause us to die. So let's say you're hiking in the woods though, and you hear some ruffling and you're not sure, is that a bunny, a bear, a moose, or another hiker, right? That is a real fear, which is when your amygdala's smoke detector goes off and you do one of your trauma responses, which is fight, flight, freeze, submit, or attach. And so that's your body's way of trying to keep you safe. In that same experience, you might be putting yourself out there and you're going to do a public speaking. Your brain might send that same signal that we're not safe, even though there's no true danger at harm to do this public speaking. So when you're experiencing a sense of anxiety connected to fear, ask yourself this question. Is it a real fear or is it a perceived fear? And so when you're able to identify that it's just a perceived fear, you can say, we're not going to die. You can talk yourself through it through positive self-talk. I'm not going to die. I'm going to survive. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be able to make it through it. And if it's an actual fear, right, that's when we can either call 911, call someone safe, figure out a safety plan to keep feeling safe in an unsafe environment. And we have resources that can kind of help you stay safe, right? There's the crisis line, there's the police department, fire department, mental health crisis line. So there's a lot of areas to help keep you safe if you are in true danger of fear. So your reflective question is, do you ever get stuck in perceived fears or real fears? Ask yourself, when you are wanting to do something new, does your fear prevent you from putting yourself out there? Does your fear prevent you from trying new things? I know in my past, I look back and I'm like, oh, that was totally a perceived fear. There was no actual harm in applying for that job or even asking for a raise, in so many different areas that I've looked at. I'm like, oh, if I would have known that there's two types of fear. I thought fear was just fear, and if we feel it, then it's not gonna be okay. But feeling the fear isn't going to kill us. It's just going to give us more information. So your inspired action is challenge one of your fears, one of your perceived fears, and try a new risk today. Maybe you reach out to somebody and say, hey, this is what's going on in my life. Or maybe you apply for that job, or maybe you ask for that raise, or maybe you set a really healthy boundary with someone that you've been nervous to set a boundary with. So your inspired action is to take a new risk today. Even though it feels scary, take that risk. And there's a really great book. It's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways, because the fear, again, when it's perceived fear, not actual fear, perceived fear, we're not going to die from a result of doing that activity. So I hope you learned a lot about fear today and the difference between a perceived fear and a real fear. Again, fear is where there's a possibility of dying or being injured or near-death experience or witnessing violence, while perceived fear is a sensation that we're going to die, but there's no actual evidence that you could die as a result of kind of doing that experience. Awesome. My name's Alyssa Cotten, and I will see you tomorrow in our halfway check-in point. I'm so excited that you've made it this far. 2 weeks in. I'm so proud of you. Have a great day.